Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, November 19th, 2018. The time is 7:03 p.m. We're in regular session tonight, and our first item of business is to establish a quorum. All members of council are here tonight. Next item will be disposition of the minutes for the regular session held on November 5th, 2018. And could I have a motion for accepting these minutes?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The minutes have been approved. We now have communications, and I have two items. The first of which is to welcome Boy Scout Troop number 71 that is visiting with us here tonight and working on their badges. And I believe Scout Leader Dave Colvin is here, and just want to welcome all of you and say thank you for being here. We'll try to offer explanations of what's happening with some of the items on business so they make sense as things go on. Thank you. Second item of communications is that council members have received a letter from the Department of Commerce, the Division of Liquor Control, and this is a notice saying that if the city would have any objections to renewal of specific liquor permits in the city, that we have until that permits expire on February 1st, 2019, and we would need to file any kind of opposition that we would have to the renewal of these permits by January 2nd, 2019. So we have that. And do we have communications from other council members? Okay. And communications from other elected officials. Do we have anything from the law director's office? Any communications? Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for being here tonight. Our auditor, Hecht, any?
No report.
No report. Mayor Patterson.
I just have a couple items to share with council tonight. The first one being the notices that I typically get on pothole, hot mix and pothole repairs. There'll be a water line break hole. There's several of them. Clearview, Bayard or B-Yard, Townsend, Dalton, and then potholes, the Stimson Avenue Bridge, State and Sunnyside, Hooper Bridges, 30 Kern, the parking lot by the steps, and then there's some berm repair that's going to be going on at 180 Columbus Road. The other item that I have for council tonight, and I will make sure I get copies of this to council. I often get notices from AEP Ohio about tree trimming in the city. Councilmember Fall, I know it's your favorite topic, but I could go through this whole list, or it might just be easier to share this with council, but it's extensive. Kern Drive, Schaefer, 2nd, 1st, Carpenter, West State Street, Washington, East State Street, Stimson Avenue, Elliott, Stewart, Cornwall. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's extensive, and it has the maps associated with it. So I will certainly get this to council, and I will talk to Scott Thompson to see if we can also put these maps and maybe even the notice up on the website. There's also door hangers that'll be going out to individuals, I'm assuming on those streets, to where the tree trimming is going to take place.
Thank you. Any other?
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. What we'll be doing next is having ordinances for second reading. And just by way of explanation, on any given business night, we have ordinances sometimes for third reading, that's the final reading, and then we have them for second reading and for first reading. And we have this in our rules of council that any ordinance will receive a reading for 3 times. The law for that is established through the Ohio Revised Code. And so we usually work in the reverse order, the third readings first and then the second readings. So we have no third readings tonight, but we do have a series of second readings for us to consider, several of which will be suspended because we have some time concerns or deadlines, and we need to operate within those and be timely in paying some of our bills and making appropriations for those to be able to pay them. So our first one will be of ordinances for second reading. And when I do read through these, I read the title, and then I also ask if there are any additional comments or questions from the council members, and it goes usually that we have any questions from council members first, or the administration, or if the audience would have any questions about it. So Ordinance 121-18 is an ordinance authorizing an emergency medical services land use and lease agreement between the City of Athens and the Athens County Commissioners. And this is introduced by Council Member Fall. And I don't see any comments or questions from anyone, so we'll move on, and I'll read the title of the next one. 122-18 is an ordinance accepting an easement on Hillcrest Drive from the Board of Commissioners of Athens County. This is introduced by Council Member Fall. And no questions or comments? Okay. Ordinance 123-18 is an ordinance amending Title 39, the Wellhead Protection Plan, and is introduced by all members of council. Okay, no questions or comments? We'll move on. Ordinance 124-18 is an ordinance amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance, and this is introduced by Council Member Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I request that we suspend the rules for 124-18.
Second.
The reason for the suspension is that in part of this ordinance of appropriation, the monies for our city income tax refunds has to be appropriated and ready for the tax year.
Okay.
We
have a motion and second for suspending the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I make a motion that we adopt 124-18.
Second.
And the reason for adoption is, of course, this is necessary for the auditor to make those refunds.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of 124-18. Do we have any additional comments or questions from council members or administration or the audience? Okay. We'll proceed with a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ordinance is approved, or the motion is approved. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Thank you. Ordinance 125-18 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to suspend temporarily the fee for parking at metered spaces in the municipal parking garage and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Katsas.
President Nisley, at this moment I would like to suspend the rules for 125-18.
Okay.
Second.
And the reason for this is this ordinance needs to take effect by November 29th, and this is the last meeting prior to that.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for suspending the rules on 125-18. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Okay, the rules have been suspended. Councilmember Katsas.
President Nisley, I would like to make a motion to adopt 125-18.
Second.
And this ordinance is straightforward, suspending the fee for parking in the parking garage during some of our holiday season. This is the parking garage excluding the 2-hour metered spaces on level 1 upper. And the closure times are as follows. There's 3 successive Thursdays after 5 p.m., November 29th, December 6th, and December 13th, and then all day Saturday, December 1st, 8th, and 15th.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for approval of 125-18, and as noted, it is above the first level, the 1 upper, which is sometimes confusing when you're driving into the parking garage. Any other comments or questions on this ordinance? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 126-18 is an ordinance suspending Athens City Code, Section 7.05.03, continuous parking in the same location from Sunday, December 16th, 2018 through midnight on Tuesday, January 1st, 2019, and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Katsas. And any comments or questions? If not, we'll move on. 127-18 is an ordinance providing for the issuance of $220,000 of notes by the City of Athens, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of renewing notes previously issued, to pay part of the cost of improvements to this municipality's wastewater treatment plant and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner, excuse me.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules for 127-18.
Second.
The reason for the suspension is that the necessary paperwork to have the notes issued needs to be done immediately after the adoption of this ordinance, due to the fact that our payments are due on the 7th of December.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for suspending the rules on 127-18. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we adopt 127-18.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second for approval of 127-18. Any other comments or questions? Anyone? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 128-18 is an ordinance providing for the issuance of $250,000 of notes by the City of Athens, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of renewing notes issued for the purpose of paying part of the costs of design engineering of the water treatment plant facilities improvements project 307 and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we suspend the rules for 128-18.
Second.
And the reasons are the same as for 127-18, the paperwork necessary to get this through.
We have a motion and second for suspending the rules on 128-18. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we adopt 128-18.
Second.
Okay. And any comments or questions from council members, staff, audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We're now moving on to ordinances for first reading. So after I read the title, then the person introducing the ordinance gives a brief explanation. There will be also a few of these, in fact, our first two ordinances in the first readings that will need suspending due to time limitations. So 129-18 is an ordinance certifying the LPA state project agreement and authorizing payment to the State of Ohio Department of Transportation to cover the city's share of that portion of State Route 56 maintenance resurfacing improvements lying within the corporation limits of the City of Athens and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that we suspend the rules for 129-18.
Second.
Reason for the suspension is that payment that's part of this ordinance is due by the end of November.
Okay, we have a motion and second for suspending the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you. I make a motion that we adopt 129-18.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for this agreement with ODOT for some repairs to State Route 56. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move forward with the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance has been approved. Ordinance 130-18 is an ordinance amending the 2018 appropriation ordinance and authorizing the auditor to make an interfund transfer. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules for 130-18.
Second.
The reason for the suspension is that this goes in tandem with 129-18. So in order to make the necessary payment by the end of November, we had to make the necessary appropriation.
Okay. We have a motion to suspend, a motion and second to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you. I make a motion that we adopt 130-18.
Second.
Okay. We have motion and second for approval of this ordinance. Any other comments or questions from council members, staff, audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. This motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 13118 is an ordinance affirming the mayor's execution of an agreement with the Athens City Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, and the City of Athens communications officers concerning wages and working conditions. It's introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I know you're going to get sick and tired of hearing my voice tonight, but allow me to read this ordinance for the first time. Section 1, Athens City Council does hereby affirm the mayor's execution of an employment agreement with the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, and the City of Athens communications officers, a copy of which is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Section 2, effective date is January 1, 2018 until December 31st, 2020, and so on.
Okay, thank you. So this has been read for the first time. Any other comments or questions from council members, staff, or audience? Okay. Move on to the reading for Ordinance 13218. This is an ordinance affirming the mayor's execution of an agreement with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, known as AFSCME Local 1, concerning wages and working conditions, and is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. The working title and the sections are essentially the same, so I'll defer to your reading.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Ordinance 13318. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a licensure and land use agreement with Ohio University, and is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. Quite simply, this is an opportunity for the city and the university to continue its partnership. This would be this would allow the City Service Safety Director to authorize a 15-year licensure and land use agreement with Ohio University for passive recreation space on land adjacent to the Hocking River. This would be behind the community center, which sits along East State Street and then butts up close to this land and then onto the Hocking River. Some conversation that the mayor shared with us about use of the space would also include disc golf, I think, was one of the conversation pieces, but it could also be an area to relax or have some benches to take in the beauty of the area. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions from council members or staff? Okay, or the audience? Yes, Mayor Patterson.
Just to kind of qualify Councilmember Butler's comments, I mean, again, it's really in flux as to what we could use with this land if this agreement goes through. It could be a number of different things. And thank you for the correction with my saying ultimate frisbee or ultimate disc, ultimate whatever last time around. What I meant to say was disc golf. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Move on to reading Ordinance 13418, which is an ordinance amending Title 11 Business Regulations, Chapter 11.04, Vending, Peddling, and Soliciting, and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. This revision of the vending ordinance, as we call it, is to align the ordinance with a monthly fee schedule instead of a yearly fee schedule. What this ordinance does is it divides the previous yearly fee of $1,500 by 12 and comes up with the $125 per month. This ordinance will allow vendors to choose on a monthly basis whether they will be vending during that month. And if the vending spaces are not filled for a particular month, then that parking space can be open for the public. So this is an initial opportunity to try to help the vending community as well as help people who are looking for a place to park. There are no major changes to this ordinance at this time, except for aligning it with those monthly payments. Those payments would be due 5 business days before the first day of the month. I mentioned that they would be $125 per month. Vendors, there are still the two category of licenses in the ordinance, A and B. If you are a new vendor, then a B license would be available to you at 50% the current rate of the A license. That's for the first 12 months of consecutive months of doing vending on Union Street. And then after that initial 12 months, another 12 months at 75% the rate. And after that 24-month period, 2-month period of being a new vendor to Athens, then you would be required to have an A license at the regular rate. Again, all unreserved spaces will revert back to public parking. The time in this ordinance has not changed for the vendors. It is still 4 a.m. to 4 p.m., which is reserved vending. And the Code Enforcement Office shall inspect vending equipment at least once per year, as set forth in the another section of the City Code on vending equipment, Section 1104.12. That is about the gist of these changes.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Crowell. And do we have any comments or questions from council members? Yes, Councilmember McGee.
I would just like to comment that, as some people know, I did an extensive analysis of some of the issues involved with vending earlier, and I'm quite sympathetic to the vendors. For instance, I realize how difficult it is to make a living vending in Athens. Quite a bit of it is, of course, the weather. So I support this part of the program that reduces the fee from a yearly to a monthly fee, so that you're not paying for winter months when nobody is using it, and so the public can use it as well. I think that two other parts of the general analysis that I think still need to be dealt with at some point in time, again, is, as I say, it's a use it or lose it, where we have a vendor who will be paying for a month, and it may be a surprising month. They may pay, say, for the month of March, thinking that it might be good weather and it might be terrible weather all through that time. And so again, so we find ourselves in the same kind of situation where nobody's using it. The vendor's losing money because they've paid for the spot. The public's not being able to use it. So I still tend to think that a more equitable resolution would be this kind of use it or lose it situation, where if the thing isn't claimed by a certain time, then the public has a right to use it. And I think that would certainly be something that could be dealt with by council, because we have basically three things. We have the money that should be paid for a vendor license by itself. Then we have money that's basically being paid for the reservation of time, okay? And then we have the money being paid for the reservation of space. And I think that's all kind of in flux. Another thing, when I was considering, I tried to be somewhat liberal to the vendors. I think I had suggested opening up some other spaces. And I know the one thing that Mr. Crane and I are kind of in agreement with, and I'd like to see how it goes. I really would like to see council at some point in time amend the ordinance to allow them to vend anywhere in Athens at any parking space in Athens. I know this exceeds the kind of the scope, but just to open it up and see how it would go, whether we would have complaints from the community, from other businesses, or whether it would actually benefit their businesses significantly. Until we do that kind of experiment, I don't think we can really make that determination. But I do think this is a very good first step, and I think it gives us the opportunity then to, in the future, consider those other options. And as I said, the one that I think council should consider at some point in time is just an experimental opening up the city to vending. So, thank you.
Thank you for the comments. More discussion, I'm sure, to follow on further details of the vending. Yes, Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. I briefly wanted to echo similar sentiments to my esteemed colleague at the other end of the table. I think it's worthwhile as well, too, to consider looking at opening up locations. Demographics of the city have changed a little bit, as well as pedestrian thoroughfares and traffic patterns. I think it'd be worthwhile experimenting. There could be a limit set on that. It could be a 6-month or 1 year that written into the ordinance. We promise to come back and reevaluate whether or not these other locations are working or not, so that it wouldn't just be open-ended.
Okay.
So thank you.
So for future
Correct.
discussion, not for the ordinance tonight. Okay. Any other comments from council members? And then we'll move on to administration. And I know we have some vendors here who would like to speak too. Mayor Patterson, any comments?
I do. I have a couple. I'm glad this dialogue is going on. I certainly respect the vendors being here and the work that you've done and speaking about your livelihood. I do have a couple concerns. First and foremost, it's going to be the tracking, especially of a monthly permitting. It's putting the onus on the code enforcement office to be tracking those, and what would happen in the situation to where someone is essentially double booked in a space from month to month, that someone comes in late or comes in early or whatever. I mean, this will be interesting to see how this unfolds. And then there's the issue of the signage, of having monthly signage being flipped up or down or whatever we end up doing. Again, it's going to be on code to manage that. So, as the service safety director can attest on a recent trip that he took with the code enforcement office, and I'm not going to speak for him other than what he reported to me, and watching code, when code is spending a lot of time doing rental inspections and things of that nature to keep our populace that rents those units safe, and now having to have code out working through these issues on a daily basis, or a monthly basis rather. I am pleased to see that Sunday has been removed from this, because I've always viewed Sunday, we only enforce the meters Monday through Saturday. Sundays, there is no meter enforcement, and the meters are open to anybody. And for these to be reserved for anyone, I always felt was odd. That's not to say that vendors, that they too can park on a Sunday in those spaces and utilize those spaces. So I'm happy to see that as well. Just for a little bit of history on this, I think council's aware that these spaces, the revenue, where that revenue came from, or the fee price came from, was what it costs to be at a meter 6 days a week, for a year, basically. And that's where that rate came from. So I'm sure council will need to be tracking any meter increases. We did recently, prior to this legislation coming forward, and prior to, and after this piece of legislation, the current legislation was enacted, we did change the enforcement time up to 6 p.m. And so there was never an adjustment if we're going to continue to use fees based on the rate of collection at a meter in the city of Athens. So I'm just sharing that with council as the other things that need to be thought through. And I've said this before, and I will repeat it again, that within the city of Athens, is someone has an agreement with a business owner in a B zone that has parking available that they are willing to essentially permit or lease to a vendor, that can happen in any B zone, to where a vending truck, we've seen it at some of our microbreweries. We've seen it as well in other locations in the city, most notably Dale's BP, which I brought up to council at our last meeting when we discussed this. So again, it's not another one that I didn't think about the last time we spoke was when Alibaba's was using the space across from what is currently the Southeast Ohio History Center in that parking lot, to where they actually had their own power drop for his vending truck for Alibaba's. So a lot to think through on this, but most relevant to city administration, again, is going to be the watchdogging over the permits on a monthly basis as opposed to what was a yearly basis.
Thank you. All right, and I think we have, yes, we have Councilmember Crowell, the auditor, and then I promise you we will also hear your comments too. So, yes, Councilmember
So
Crowell.
I just want to remind everybody who wasn't able to listen to council last week that this is sort of a first crack at this ordinance, and so it's great that we're getting these additional ideas, and we started with the work that Member McGee had done, and we're trying to move it forward from there. This is a first crack for January 1 to be able to make some major changes, hopefully in the summer when we can actually do some painting. And while I might be open to the idea of opening the city to vending at any spot, the problem is the fire safety code and how you have to have 10 feet between a vendor and a private vehicle. I spoke with Chief Reimer today. He wasn't sure he had that same interpretation, and so he's going to go back and look at that again and make sure he understands it is. He can decide himself, or the city can decide himself, to have 7 feet between vending trucks instead of 10 feet. But I believe that the fire code, the new fire code that will come into effect January 1, requires 10 feet from the edge of a vending unit to a private vehicle. So that's where we get into this issue. If we open up the whole city, it's going to be impossible to be in compliance with that code. We're going to have specific spots that are designed and painted, hopefully with the city administration next summer. So it's great. We're going to continue to work with the Vending Association and the ad hoc committee and try to take in all these ideas. And I just want to make sure everybody understands this is a first chance, and we're going to be continue working on this in 2019.
Okay. Auditor Hecht?
I just wanted to comment on the fact that the fees from those, unless it's changed since last I saw the ordinance, have been changed. Previously, the fees, the money, revenue from that all went into the general fund, and now we're going to post part of that in the garbage fund. Is that right? Is that still? Or
May I reply to that?
Yes, Councilmember Crowell.
So
yes.
the current ordinance, the ordinance that we've been working from, has 1/6 of the money going into the garbage fund and the remainder of the money going to the parking enforcement fund. But we just changed it to remove that garbage fund allocation, and then the money going into the general fund. There didn't seem to be any.
No more split. It'll all go into the general fund as it has.
The ordinance didn't mention the general fund. The current ordinance doesn't mention the general fund. It says parking enforcement fund and garbage fund.
Right. It didn't, because we have a vendor license account line in the general fund. It just wasn't necessary until, you decided, I guess you've changed that now. It's all going to go in the one fund line. Okay, I hadn't seen that final issue for that, because that would have been a change. It's always gone in the general fund. It will continue to go into the general fund, not the parking enforcement fund. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Crane, and if you could give us your name, address, and if you're representing a group, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Certainly.
And we set the timer, so you'll see the little things going
Wonderful, thank
from
you.
green to red.
My name's Damon Crane. I live at 96 Hudson Avenue in Athens. I own and operate Hot Potato Food Truck. I'm president of the Athens Mobile Vending Association, also a member of City Council's ad hoc committee on vending. Just speaking for myself here tonight, although I suppose I could speak for the ad hoc committee, since we were all unanimously in agreement of supporting the proposal that Councilmember Crowell has brought forward. I just wanted to speak in favor of that briefly. We've known that there are big changes on the horizon for vending for a while now. We've been discussing various ways they could play out for over a year. And we know that even just the new fire safety laws require big changes relative to our present setup. So the fact that big changes are going to happen seems to be inevitable at this point. There's still the question of what they will all be. And it seemed that we weren't going to have that all figured out in time for the first of the coming year, which, if we stick to the current fee schedule, means that vendors would have to pay for the whole year or at least the whole first quarter, not knowing if things are going to change in the middle of the year, if they change, whether that would be for better or worse, or it could even delay things to not be major changes from not being implemented until January 1st, 2020, which I don't think any vendors would want. So the proposal that Councilmember Crowell has made, I think, is a very sensible stopgap measure. It gives the city the flexibility to work these things out, get this decided, hopefully as soon as the city can, and then also for the changes to be implemented as early as the following month, since the fee and reservation schedule would be monthly rather than annually. So I think it gives us the flexibility we need, gives us the timetable we need, and yeah, just wanted to speak in favor of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome.
Give us your name and address.
I'm welcoming you. My name is Brandon Buckley, and I live at 247 West Union Street in Athens. I'm the owner of A-Town Pies and Fries. And I just want to speak on a few things that over the year of me having the food truck, I've only owned it for 2 years. Used to own another business in town. And I was trying to figure out what would make it easier for me to do business. With the way it's zoned now, it's been kind of difficult to be uptown on a regular basis. I wanted to be up more, but with the parking with general population can park at 4 o'clock. I do a lot of lunches at corporate lunches and places and some dinners. With the way it's set up now is at 4 o'clock, anyone can park those spots and it's easy to get trapped. And if you're a truck where you haul it, you can't get your truck in to maneuver, to haul in or haul out. So some of my concerns was, if we have the parking for vendors strictly for vending on those times, or at least extend it, I would actually be able to vend more, and I'm sure some of the other food trucks would be able to vend more, knowing that we aren't getting trapped, or if we pull up, someone's already in the spot right in front of us, we can't park, so we have to haul it back home and cut the losses for the day. So the new zoning, I think, is great. I would also like to see, more discussion in with adding either the parking full-time for vending, or at least extend it where we have the option where you can come and go for dinner. Because, like I said, I would be up there a lot more knowing that I can pull in and pull out without being blocked or refused spot. But yeah, those are my biggest concerns. I'm sure we've discussed more in our meetings, and would like to definitely work with City Council more to really pursue these issues more. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you so much for the feedback. We'll move on to the reading for Ordinance 135-18. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into or to extend the agreement with the Board of Athens County Commissioners for the purpose of obtaining the services of the Public Defender's Office through December 31st, 2019. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to read the part of the ordinance here. The title is pretty much everything in Section 1, but Section 2 states, the mayor is hereby authorized to expend up to $160,000 from the 2019 General Fund 101-106 Transaction Code 300 for said contract, and the ordinance shall be in full force and effect the earliest moment permitted by law upon its passage and approval by the mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or further discussion? Councilmember Katsas?
Yes, thank you. Is the price staying the same from last year? Do we know if there's been an increase or?
I'm pretty sure it increased.
It's increased.
Okay. All right.
I think the history of these contracts is it always increases.
They creep up. Okay.
One of the problems is that we're on a sort of a different schedule than the state. And sometimes, I believe about the middle of the year, they'll send us an updated invoice for payment, which is usually looks like they're charging more than they did in the previous 6 months. But most of this is controlled by the county commissioners and the state of Ohio.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ordinance 13618 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 2913 to increase sewer rates in accordance with the Athens City Code and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by all members of council. And do we have any details or additional information that we want to provide? Yes, Councilmember Butler.
If you'd like, President Isley, I can just acknowledge briefly that there's a desire to change the rates, to increase them. A rate that previously had been at $14.81 will jump to $24.81. That's an example. Residential, commercial, and industrial rates will be increased.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
If I may, no, they won't. So this particular increase is to the base rate structure. It's not to the per gallon after the base rate, and that's intentional. You know, historically, this body has increased sewer rates on a percentage basis to both base rates as well as to the consumption beyond the first 1,000 gallons or the use beyond the first 1,000 gallons. This particular ordinance wouldn't do that. It would just be the base rates. And here's the bottom line. The thought is, based on all of our analysis, we have to make debt payments. We have to do capital improvements. The base rates are a set amount of money that come in. It's kind of like your car payment, right? You can't choose not to make your car payment in a given month. We can't choose not to make our debt payment for our sewer system, for the debt that we've incurred over the years for a variety of projects. And so this ensures that the base rate makes the debt payments, and then the operations are handled by the money that's for the subsequent consumption and such. So this is not a modification percent increase to those residential, commercial, industrial, second to 5 millionth gallon, but this is specific to that first 1,000 gallons.
And we could say also historically that at the time that the sewer improvements went through, that we did enact rate increases projecting out, but said we would always come back and revisit these to make sure. So I want to thank Service Safety Director Stone for doing the research and checking with the auditor to make sure that we are being able to cover our debts. So, but this is going to be an increased amount that people need to budget for next year. Yes, Councilmember Reisner.
I just want to make a note that based upon what I've seen from the analysis that the Service Safety Directors performed and the city engineer, that unless these base rate changes are implemented, it's going to be extremely difficult to service our debt. In fact, I think it'll be impossible unless we found some other source of revenue to cover it, maybe go into debt over that, another bank loan.
The good news is that people are, we bill sewer based on water consumption. So the good news is that people are conserving water, right? And that's a good thing from a sustainability perspective in our city. The bad news is that, when your revenue is based on water consumption, and your sewer revenue is based on water consumption, when people conserve water, there's less of it consumed or less of it used. And when it comes to being able to make these payments, you have to be able to continue to do it. So,
okay. Thank you for the comments. Yes, we have two other questions, Councilmember Butler and then Councilmember Crowell.
I just want to express thanks for the clarification. The base rate is changing, correct? Right. Thank you.
Councilmember Crowell.
I'm just curious about the last time we had a base rate change.
So in 2013, this body passed a piece of legislation that set rate increases for 20 years, and there's a schedule associated with that. I don't have it with me right now, but it's a percentage increase per year based on a projection. One of the things we've found since 2013 is that the percentage increase that has been levied in any given year based on that schedule does not coincide with a subsequent amount of additional cash flow. So, for instance, if that schedule set a 3% increase for a given year, maybe only a 2% or a 1.5% increase in revenue occurred in that year, and I believe that's due to a couple things. Number one, the conservation figure that I noted at the beginning. Or really, that's the main reason is the conservation there. So this adjustment is specific to base rates only. It's not a percentage increase on those additional gallons, but this guarantees that there's a set amount of money that comes in that allows us to service our debt. But if you'd like, I can sit down and go over the last time that there was a schedule published for rate increases, and like I said, that was in 13.
In 13. Okay. Yes, Councilmember McGee.
Thank you. I may be wrong on this, but it seems that when someone receives a water bill, they receive a bill that is both trash and water. We have an instance where the water bill is going to go up somewhat for the base rate. Is that right?
So the when a utility bill comes, it has water,
right,
and sewer and trash.
Right. And my understanding is that the trash fund is very well off, and it has been very well off for a number of years, perhaps.
It's on a downward trend. Let's put it that way. So, for instance, when we look at 2019 Athens Hocking Solid Waste and the Athens Hocking Recycling Center's projected costs, it's increased, significantly over its previous year. Now that said, I mean, it still is our best deal. We went through an RFP process a couple of years ago with Athens Hocking Solid Waste District and the Athens Hocking Recycling Center, and I think we compared those to Waste Man. I wasn't in this position at the time, but I know from my cursory review that we compared with a private company called Waste Management, and a private company called Rumpke, and in both instances they were not competitive compared to Athens Hocking Recycling Center and Athens Hocking Solid Waste District. That said, their fee has increased significantly in each year. So I'll come to you next year and we'll look at trends for trash and what both of those entities need to operate and what we're charging right now for trash. But the mayor and I discussed this, and it's a bridge too far at this point to get into the trash fee structure and seek an increase on trash fee structure, because if you look at our legislation surrounding trash fees, there's about 50 different categories that you can be put in based on the way that you consume trash in the city of Athens or the way that you use trash in the city of Athens. So, but to your point of it being healthy today, but maybe 3 years from now, based on current trends, it will not be able to be in the red.
My point is simply, and thank you for explaining it in detail, but my point is simply that if the citizens are being billed for water and sewage and trash, and the trash is real healthy, we have the money, and we don't have the money for the water, why can't we lower the rates for the citizens for the trash? And so it evens out so that instead we have to, why should we constantly be raising rates for citizens? It's the follow-up procedure. We raise A today and there's B tomorrow. And that was my question.
I think we have some information from Auditor Heck that might be able to help us on this. And these are proprietary funds too. And
Just to comment on water, sewer, garbage, and actually the parking garage is one of those funds who operate solely on the revenue from fees. Right. And so none of that money can be used on the other funds. So just because they all come, water, sewer, and garbage come on one bill, we can't use garbage money to subsidize the water bill, pay any of their debts, any of that. Proprietary funds are what are considered operations that could be handled by a private company that the city does themselves. And so they all have to be considered separately.
And I think I hear what you're saying, Councilmember McGee, that you wanted to perhaps have the city administration considering lowering trash fees right now. But if I hear what the administration's saying, long term, we need to be looking at the long-term picture of what the projections are for trash, and it doesn't look like there's room for being able to reduce the fee.
Could the auditor enlighten us what the trash fund is right now as far as reserve? You know?
Yes. If you give me a minute, somebody else wants to comment, feel free.
Yes, Mayor Patterson.
So not to answer your question, but I do have a comment. The other thing that we're really tracking closely is the global market for recycling. And that can be a very difficult conversation moving forward in that, if we're having to, if less is actually being repurposed, and everyone's probably familiar, and this is probably good for a public service announcement, that film plastics is not being processed at the MRF at this point in time. And so, again, that's having to go into the landfill, and we really don't know what's going to happen with the future global markets with recycling. There could be more going to landfill. That's expensive as well. So we're looking at that and meeting often with Athens Hawking Recycling so we can get our heads wrapped around that. And then there's the composting program. I mean, the pilot's underway. That's at this point looking successful. If that were to be a full-blown program, there's a cost associated with that as well.
I do.
Okay, so currently in the garbage fund, the unappropriated balance is $961,000, which is almost $1 million. It is in the unappropriated fund balance, which means the money we think we will need to finish out paying our bills through the end of the year has already been spoken for, and this money is not spoken for. In comparison, the sewer fund has $9,000 unappropriated to spend, which is an even bigger, more expensive fund to operate. On the other hand, the water fund at this moment has over $1 million unappropriated also. So that's why the sewer fund really needs adjustments. And yes, I wouldn't recommend reducing any rates. I recommend that we don't try to raise them just because we're raising other rates. But I brought that up in the last couple of years about the garbage fund and what we should do, because I don't believe we should be collecting more money than we think we're going to need. However, there are a lot of things that money could be used for now that we see that we have a good cushion. And we are supposed to keep a healthy fund balance in all of our funds, which doesn't always work out, just in case of emergencies and things like that. So that's where I am.
Thanks for the comments. Okay. We have a corollary ordinance following this one with the sewer rate increases, and the next one is 13718. And this is an ordinance amending Ordinance 12812, establishing the allocation of sewer service charges to the sewer debt fund and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to read Section 1. Effective January 1, 2019, Section 1 of Ordinance 012812 is hereby amended to read as follows. A minimum of, there's a strikeout of 25% is now amended to 30% of the monthly sewer rate charges collected for Sewer Fund 750 shall be received into the Sewer Debt Fund 758. The remaining, this is struck out, 75% now changed to 70% of the service charges shall be made available for annual operating budgets.
Okay, so we're increasing the amount to the sewer debt fund.
We're making an adjustment.
Yep, okay. Any questions or comments?
Basically, I mean, we've done this for a long time where we've taken a certain amount of the revenue. This is the only fund we do this with, where we take a certain amount of the revenue and put it automatically into the debt fund because we know those debt payments are going to be there. In all other instances, although I'm going to come back to this body next year after we complete the water treatment plant project, and I'm going to recommend something similar, though not to these percentages, for the water fund, that we just divert a certain amount of the revenue that comes in straight into the debt fund, so that doesn't require you then later to transfer money between the fund itself to the debt fund to make those debt payments. We just automatically budget based on the amount of debt that we are carrying. You know, it's expensive to treat sewage, and the improvements that we did made a great improvement, but this allows us to make sure that we make our debt payments.
Good. Thank you. Ordinance 13818 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with the Employee Benefits Service Center to serve as the city's third-party health insurance administrator, a TPA, and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. allow me to read Section 1. The Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into contract with the Employees Benefit Service Center to serve as third-party administrator, TPA, of the city's health insurance program for the period from January 1, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. Said contract shall contain, at a minimum, the following controls. And below that is our 7 paragraphs indicating the various controls that the city shall have with this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this ordinance? Okay, 13918 is an ordinance authorizing a stop-loss medical insurance contract and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. This ordinance has 2 sections. The main one, Section 1, effective January 1, 2019, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a 1-year contract with Sirius American to cover the city's stop-loss insurance.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on to 14018, an ordinance to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Athens, Ohio during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm searching for the ordinance itself is it's all on your drives. How many pages is this thing?
At least the city budget. There's 100 tabs, I think, or maybe probably closer to 50
pages. Okay. Well, get ready. I'm going to read it all to you tonight. No, just no. I don't want to go back to the hospital, please. This is our budget for 2019. Since I've been here, I've seen 7 of these come, and this is the longest one yet. Not quite sure what to say about it other than a city has to have a budget to run on. We have to do this. We need it in place before the new year starts. Otherwise, things stop.
And if I'm looking at the form correctly on the Google Drive, the document that we have, the general fund total for this budget is $15,500,000, which comparing with other years, I think we were at 15.4 a few years ago. So it's a tight budget. We appreciate all the work of the departments and Service Safety Director Stone and the auditor and our deputy auditor Laura Kreider, who've been and our chair of finance. And the mayor, who've been working on this since August. Oh, I know Deputy Director Kreider has been working on it since August to work through the numbers, and Director Stone was still working on it Friday night at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. So thank you very much.
This is a living document.
It's forever changing. Again, I want to echo what President Knisely was saying, that the auditor's office was quick in getting this out. And then as we were receiving it, it was going out to all departments, and they were, looking it over and not doing any things with the ones and 100s and 200s, but, looking at 500s and where there was some room for items. And I think that Service Safety Director and I were pretty stingy with moving forward. But that's not to say that there aren't needs in the city. There are. But just trying to be as fiscally conservative as possible.
Mm-hmm. So we've got the general fund. Then when you add in the proprietary funds that the auditor was speaking about earlier, then that brings our grand total to $44,279,000. So just to give you an idea on the scope of the operations for the city and the responsibilities of the auditor, who's coming up to speak.
I just wanted to comment on this. They have done a pretty good job on the general fund, making changes, but not going over what we've been. As you know, the funds there have been pretty tight this year. Mm-hmm. So last year's initial budget for the general fund was $15,900,000, and it's $15,500,000 this year. However, for the entire city budget, we're about $1.5 million over what we were last year.
Okay.
But of course, some of the funds can handle those increases because of increased revenue. We just don't see any increased revenue in the general fund.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. It's good to have this first reading in November yet, so I appreciate the work on it.
I actually have a question. I'm sorry.
Yes, if you want to come up to the microphone and give us your name and address, and we'll try and answer your questions or question.
All right. My name is Preston Minter. I live at 63 South Green Drive. I just have a question about just like the budget. Are there any like notable changes or differences that have made? Obviously, like we've talked about like some different like influx shifts and stuff like that. But like, is there anything notable that like students, like the city, can like kind of like expect to like change, or anything that like you, when you're thinking of a budget, that you really want to like put emphasis on this upcoming year, or anything like that?
I can offer a general comment, and the auditor can confirm whether this is very accurate or right. But when you think about the general fund, that $15 million, close to 80% of that is for salary and fringe. And what we're doing is trying to do our best job, or the administration is, and council working with them, to make sure that we're as fully employed in all of our departments as we can be, to offer reasonable benefits for all of our employees and to keep the city operating. So given that 80% of that is salary and fringe, there's not a whole lot of leeway. And so, and also given the auditor's comments that we were at $15,900,000 last year, but we're at $15,500,000 this year, there's not a whole lot of, I don't think, initially, there's not a lot of significant change that I'm aware of in looking at it.
Yeah,
Service Safety Director.
Sure. I mean, this pays for the operation of the city. So it pays for the police department to come and go in a given year, and all those police officers to come to work and to do what they do, for the fire department to do that, to have the code enforcement department, for the arts, parks, and recreation department. So this pays for just the operation of those services in any given year to continue. So it's not like it's a gigantic bucket of money that we can decide to go and take 50% of it and put over here to do something new. It's so that the city operates. Through the year, there's a variety of appropriations ordinance that where we come back to the well, if you will, for a particular project per se. So, for instance, a couple of the appropriations ordinance that Councilmember Reisner read this evening talked about some maybe new things, even this so far into the year that we're doing, that we seek an additional appropriation to do. But by and large, this operations budget pays for the people that continue to run the city.
Mayor Patterson.
Yeah, to kind of follow up on that, Preston, something else that comes into our budget, into the larger $44,279,000, is grants that we receive. So to throw out to you, something that we will be looking at in 2019 is deconflicting Richland Avenue, and a large portion of that is paid for off of federal grants or a state grant. But also, you know, the another proprietary fund for the city is the street fund, and so monies will come out of that as well for street improvement in that area. So, I mean, there is some interesting things coming up, but again, to kind of echo what everyone else has been saying, the $15 million that we're talking about, $15.5 million, is by and large, as President Nisley was saying, is for personnel. That's the vast majority of our general fund monies that come in are for paying personnel and benefits.
Perfect. Sorry, thank you for clarifying. A 60-page budget just seems daunting.
Yeah. A lot of departments.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, to the mayor's point, $5 million of Fund 589, which is basically a flow-through fund. It's not city revenue. It's revenue that comes from state and federal sources, goes towards a variety of projects, and we have to draw that down at the end of the year and then reappropriate it for next year. So, you know, $5 million of that $44 million, for instance, is state and federal funds that we already know are coming. We just have to reappropriate them for 2019.
Mm-hmm. And a large part for the pedestrian passage.
Yeah, pedestrian passageway, the bridge by Stop and Cop, half of the East State Street project that hasn't been paid out yet, so things like that.
And Stimson Avenue, next steps.
That's not included yet.
Not yet.
Right.
Okay, all right, stay tuned. All right, we'll move on to 14118. This is an ordinance amending Ordinance 7116, authorizing non-union pay grades and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 1 of this ordinance reads, effective January 1, 2019, Ordinance 7116 non-union pay grades is hereby amended to add cemetery maintenance in pay grade 1 and an IT systems administrator in pay grade 7 as attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on to 142.18, an ordinance authorizing 2019 staffing levels and non-union compensation, repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to read the pertinent sections. Section 1, effective the first pay period of 2019, authorized staffing levels attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference shall be in effect, and all ordinances inconsistent therewith shall be repealed. Section 2, pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 731.08, power of legislative authority as to salaries and bonds in the City of Athens non-union fringe benefits, City Council does hereby authorize a 2% general hourly pay increase for full-time and permanent part-time non-union employees. Non-union employees in a probationary status shall not be eligible for any general hourly pay increase. Section 3, City Council does hereby authorize a one-time lump sum payment of 2% to those employees whose general hourly pay rate exceeds or will exceed the maximum pay rate of his or her pay grade, a copy of which is attached hereto and incorporated herein for reference. Said hourly pay increase or lump sum payment shall be effective the first payday period of 2019.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? Move on to Ordinance 143.18, an ordinance adopting a fringe benefits package for non-union personnel within the City of Athens and repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
This is, thank you, Madam President. This document is, let me count, 27 pages, including exhibits and so on. So I'm not going to read all that either. The title pretty much says everything there is about this piece of legislation.
Thank you.
We do this every year, and again, this is its first reading, so we will be aware if at any time someone comes forward with an amendment to make a change. We'll listen.
Okay. Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. One of the shortcomings I've noticed in looking through this document, which I'm going to challenge us to consider. If you recall, I mentioned last week that we need to do our homework, and there's a lot to read. We have how many new ordinances? 20, 21 total? 23, something along those lines. But in looking through this, I don't believe that I see a maternity leave package or something along those lines. And I would like to challenge us as a community, as a body of legislative as well as the executive branch, to be forward-thinking. I mean, something that Athenians pride themselves on is being progressive, but we're also slow to change, and we have a hard time with change. So I think it's something for us to look at and consider. I do see that it could be a benefit to the city. Our nearest competitor, if you would like to say, is the university. I think their benefits package for maternity leave, or sometimes also referred to as parental leave policy, is probably better than ours. So it's something I think is worthwhile for us to look at. In a 2017 Ernst & Young survey, they found that more than 90% of companies with paid family leave policies reported either a positive or neutral effect on morale, profitability, and productivity. So I do think there is some worthwhileness for us to look at in considering this.
Thank you for the comments. We do have under item 13 on page 18 the donation of sick leave, although I realize that's not specifically addressing that, but it says, the new language says any employee in their first year of service who would otherwise be eligible for maternal or paternal leave under FMLA may receive up to a maximum of 80 hours of donated sick leave each calendar year with the approval of the elected official or the appointing authority. And yes, we have comments from administration. Or,
Yeah, I can
yes.
just explain this point. I mean, this point is a direct response to that issue. We actually had, in the last couple of years, we had 2 non-union employees have babies in the first year of their employment. When they were in the first year of employment, they were not eligible to receive donated sick leave under the terms of the sick leave donation policy. There were quite a few employees who wanted to donate to them, but were not able to because our donation policy made it an FMLA Family Medical Leave Act qualifying event. You're not able to qualify for FMLA if you haven't been employed for 1 year. That's the reason why they were unable to receive that donated leave from their peers. This change would basically lift that FMLA requirement for maternal and paternal leave for those people in that particular situation. So this is a baby step in the right in that direction, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks for the comments. Any other comments or questions? Yes. Ms. Roman, you have to go up and announce your name and your address and if you're representing a group.
I'm not representing the group. Judith Roman, 12 Northwood Drive. What is the maternity leave now? There's none?
So you can take any of your earned leave right now for...
So you mean vacation?
You can take vacation, you can take sick leave, or you can take compensatory time. If you
And how much is sick leave?
I'm sorry?
How many days is sick leave?
I think it's 3.1 hours per pay period.
So what would that come out to be if someone worked for 2 years?
Sure. So, I mean, if you worked for 2 years and you took no... Give me a moment, I'll do the math. And you had taken no leave.
But to answer one question, though, there is no formal policy in place at the moment.
Well, I agree with you. There absolutely should be, especially in Athens, which is such a forward-thinking town. It's awful that you don't have anything.
So it's 161 hours would be if you had worked for 2 years, and you plus you'd be.
So on a 40-hour week, that's not even 4 weeks.
Well,
40 that would be what? That would be 120. So.
Sure.
So they don't get the standard 6 weeks.
Not for sick leave. Their vacation leave increases every summer.
Your vacation
right, but
increases.
you don't have anything that's separate for maternity leave, which it seems like you should have. That should be separate from sick leave. Because you're not sick, you're having a baby.
Well, we appreciate your comments.
Yeah,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good point.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Yes. Yes, Councilmember Grace.
I would just like to echo Member Butler's comments that I do think it's something we should consider, and certainly I would fully support this being a family leave, not strictly maternity. And I know from some of the research that I have done, women in the workforce are more supported, have better pay in countries that offer paternity leave. So I want to be sure that we're not narrowly defining eligibility, and that it is a family leave for any changes that we might consider.
Okay. Auditor Hecht.
Can I just clarify that we don't have paid maternity, paternity leave, but any employee would qualify after a year for 12 weeks of FMLA. And it would be unpaid, they could use any time that they had, but it might not cover that full 12 weeks, which is a pretty long time. So it's not that if you are having a baby, you can't take a leave and come and we keep that job for you. It's just that it's not paid.
Okay.
Thank
you. All right.
Mayor.
Oh, Mayor Patterson, yes. Okay.
Just to share, and again, it was during this budgeting cycle that this conversation came up, and it was specific to maternity leave, paternity leave. So know that it's not like something that's brand new in the city administration's eyes. It's something that I think, certainly warrants further exploration into how that could happen. But I guess with the up to 80 hours donated, so that's 2 weeks on top of what someone could accrue within their first 2 years. That would be 6 weeks of paid leave. But anyway, my point being is that it's certainly a conversation that's been had under this administration.
Okay, thank you. Ordinance 14418 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 5411, the water and sewer regulations. This is introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. Similar to some other ordinances we've been looking at earlier this evening, there are some strikeouts, and this is changing the water and sewer regulations, specifically Athens Code Title 5, Chapter 5.04, Sewer Regulations, Section 5.04.09, A and B, Cost of Sewer Connection, amended to read as follows. And so the strikeout is acknowledging a sum of money. So the sum of $3,000 per equivalent EPA residential unit plus labor and costs shall be charged. And that's the strikeout. And so now it's acknowledging that the fee for installation of new sanitary sewer taps connections by the City of Athens is to be established by separate ordinance. And then letter B, similar, there's a strikeout there for the sum of 10 cents per square foot for every 2,500 square feet of increase in impermeable surface. And then the new language says that the fee for new development, stormwater taps and connections is established by separate ordinance. And then lastly, in Section 2, the cost of a water connection. Again, we have a strikeout there, which is the sum of $1,300. That's the strikeout, plus labor and costs, with new language acknowledging that the fee for installation of new taps and connections by the City of Athens is established by a separate ordinance. Thank you. And the administration may want to address that too as well.
Sure. The next several ordinances are circumstances where it's basically a housekeeping thing where the fee is currently in the various chapters in the legislation, and it basically changes so that rather than have it established in various bits and pieces across the entire code, it says will be established by separate ordinance, and then at any time there's a fee modification, it gets modified and then updated in Chapter 1. And this is something that we worked out with Clerk Walker regarding the best way to approach this. So I think the next several are in that category. It didn't change the fee, it just says where they're placed inside the code.
Great.
Thank you, Service Safety Director.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Ordinance 14518. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 9, General Regulations, Chapter 9.02, Fire Prevention, to add Section 9.02.06, Inspections and Fees, introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. This is one of the ordinances that City Service Safety Director Andy Stone was referring to. We did talk about this in committee. This is again an attempt to empower us at the local level in regards to fire inspections. So the new bold language is acknowledging that to the extent allowed by Ohio laws and regulations, the Athens Fire Department may conduct inspections to improve and maintain public safety under the direction of the chief of the department. A fee schedule shall be recommended by the chief and established by a separate ordinance. Fee schedule shall be reviewed annually and adjusted when necessary, and then goes into discussion about when fees can be collected, and specifically construction inspection fees, fire safety inspections fees, and contracted and extraordinary response services.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? We'll move on to Ordinance 14618, an ordinance amending Ordinance 4110, Contractor Registration Annual Fee, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. As the other ones were noted, this is another housekeeping by establishing by a separate ordinance the fees for registering as a contractor in the City of Athens.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Ordinance 14718 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 11, Chapter 11.07, Solicitors and Peddlers, Section 11.07.05, License Fee, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
The same with this. establishing it into our Chapter 1, which is an ordinance concerning fees within the city of Athens.
Okay, thank you. And I'll assume I'm not seeing any comments or questions. We'll move on to 14818 as an ordinance amending Ordinance 11817 and Title I, General Provisions to establish fees as required by the Athens City Code. And this is introduced by all council members. And is there someone who would like to speak to this? And what I think we can allude to is that this is establishing within the code one section where we will be having under Title I our general, all of our codes identified in fees as required by the Athens City Code. Yes, Councilmember McGee.
I've been trying to figure out exactly where this is placed in the particular ordinances to be authorized. And I'm concerned with the ordinance that deals with the trash pickup. We have, with the owner-occupied situation, we have the owner-occupied can be charged $6.50 for one trash can, basically a 30-gallon unit, whereas a student rental, which may have the same number of people, or actually a rental by itself, same number of people, is charged $12. And I've known several instances where the exact same use has resulted in the tenant being charged $12 or $6 more than the owner who has the same number of people in the house. It seems like that is unfortunate and unfair, actually. So I believe that should be looked at and should allow, under the circumstances that, depending upon the number of people in a household, a tenant household or any non-owner occupied household, that they be permitted to have a $6.50 rather than a $12 fee for the trash pickup.
Yes.
I mean, there's no change to previous. It's just it just happens to be part of this piece of legislation. There's no change to previous years. Certainly, it's something that when we revisit trash fees in 2019, we'd be willing to look at, because I understand Councilmember McGee's concern about that potential disparity.
Okay.
We're concerned about it as well, Member McGee. We, as Service Safety Director alluded to earlier, this is that one area in code right now within the fee section that has so many different iterations of collection. If you look carefully, there's 8 different franchise fees, which are important. But to your point, this is something that Deputy Service Safety Director has been looking into when it comes to this, as have we. So it's not falling off the radar. It's trying to figure that one out.
Okay. I'll keep an eye on it too.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Any other comments or questions? We'll move on to Ordinance 14918. This is an ordinance establishing Athens City Code Title 49, Management, Administration, and Control of the Use of the City's Public Rights-of-Way, introduced by all members of council, but I believe Councilmember Fall will speak to this for us.
Yeah, we had a presentation by Ice Miller, the consulting firm, that helped with putting this new chapter together for public right-of-way. After that presentation, I was approached by several council members that were uncomfortable with the giving up of our complete control, of council's control and ability to be able to manage our right-of-way. Right-of-ways seem very boring and dull, but in some of the most contentious discussions that we've had in this council room has been about right-of-ways. So they aren't that boring. They're sexy, exciting. So basically we got back together, Lisa Eliason and Andy and Chris and Pete all got together to see how we can reestablish that balance, the check and balance that our government needs to make sure that we have oversight. And as it is, now that what we've come up with is the ability for council to vote on the first application of a company or a entity for that right-of-way. Usually when we bring up right-of-way ordinance and licenses, they're good for 10 years. These will be now for 7 years. And the renewal afterwards will be done from the administrative point of view. So that will make it easier for administration, but we still have a say. Then also, the council also has the ability to go into a right-of-way license and deny it further if there was some kind of problem with the people who held that license. So that gives us the ability to have oversight over this process. One thing that one should be warned, with some of the, especially utilities and stuff, ORC requires that those licenses and negotiations are a lot quicker than our normal way of being able to do things within 6 weeks. So those situations will have to move through council a little more quickly than other ones. So is that pretty much what?
Yep, that's exactly it. Basically council is the first approval for all of these certificates of registration. And that's the utilities. I expect there to be about 15 of those, if you think about it. And then once they're in place, perpetually until that company no longer is in business. American Electric Power, Columbia Gas, Time Warner, Frontier, Verizon, AT&T, and such, people who operate a system in the right of way. And so the first time that we issue a certificate of registration to them, council will issue it and then it'll just stay into effect until it will be revoked. The special right of way permits, which functionally replace the revocable license, the first time council approves those, can always revoke it if ever. And then subsequently, rather than come back for renewal every 7 years, they would come just through the administration.
Right.
So council basically retains all the authority over the rights of way with the changes that everyone recommended.
Right. Okay. And I appreciate everybody's willingness to come together and work on this issue. I think that, it's as we see in larger issues, the state and federal level, that there needs to be oversight and the balance of power and the ability for one section of government to have a yay or nay say about some of the operations and other things of the other parts of the government. So it's important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from council? Yes, Councilmember Katsas.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to, well, first off, thank Member Fall for stepping forward and working on the conversation. I think that her time in planning definitely did help elect some positive change. The question that I have, and this is probably just to help the public kind of understand. I mean, this is an overhaul of a big section of code, and right of way is really, that's how a city. If you don't have right of way, you don't have a city. So it's the base DNA almost to a municipality. This is going, and I would love administration to correct me and add to this, but this will allow us to have a little bit more control in working with these utilities as we move forward. There's more things that are going to want to use the right of way. Small cell. I don't know where we're at right now with the federal level. What kind of control we don't have over that, but hopefully this is going to allow us to have a little bit better, encourage better behavior with these people that are operating in our public right-of-way.
Mayor Patterson.
I can speak to Member Katsas. I'm glad you brought up small cell. That was one of the big conversations, as is usually the case at the National League of Cities. And the one thing that the National League is concerned about is preemption at the federal level to be able to come in with 5G, which 5G is a great thing. It's what's going to keep the United States kind of on the cutting edge of technologies and moving forward continuing to move forward in the 21st century. But, also know that I was on the phone throughout all of the HB 478 meetings that were taking place to address, in particular, small cell. So, the city of Athens, Southeastern Ohio, did have input into what came out of that at the state level, but at the federal level, FCC, it's up in the air in terms of.
And,
Service Safety Director.
Yes, sure.
Yes.
And to the mayor's point, with preemption, one of the reasons this piece of legislation is 30 pages long is because of state and federal law. We basically didn't just write this ourselves in a vacuum. We employed a professional who's very familiar with state and federal law as it relates to utilities. And so our legislation jives basically with state and federal law, and we're not passing something that then subsequently runs afoul of the fact that that is superseded by state and federal law. Of note, initially when we approached this, we talked about rewriting Title 35, and Title 35 currently is our telecommunications legislation brought forth in the 90s. The reason we thought we would rewrite that with this right-of-way legislation is because so much of it has been preempted since the time it was passed that basically it's not legitimate anymore because state law supersedes. We backed away from that because it just was going to create too much of a challenge in changing our code all at once, and so we passed this as a new title, Title 49, and subsequently have entered into a contract with the same law firm to help us go through our existing Title 35 and identify those specific parts that are no longer able to be regulated at the local level, and then strike those portions and then keep the portions that we still are able to. So I would anticipate probably sometime in spring coming back to you with a review of that legislation.
Okay, great. Thanks for the comments. We'll move on to Ordinance 15018, an ordinance amending ordinances 409, 311, 12412, 12414, and the Athens City Code, establishing salaries for certain elected officials. This is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me read the pertinent sections. It says, effective January 1, 2019, ordinances, as you mentioned there, shall be amended to read as follows. Section 3.09.01 deals with the mayor's salary. Sections 3.0202 is auditor. 3.0903 is members of council. Section 30904, President of Council. 30905, Director of Law, and 309.06, Treasurer. These this ordinance and its amendments commence January 1, 2019, and extend until I think
2024?
2024, calendar year 2024. So there are pay schedules for each of the different positions, and I believe the way we calculated this, they are essentially a 2% increase per year starting 2019 till 2024. Is my memory correct on that? We covered so much that day, I'm still on a fog.
Yes.
I'll
just...
Auditor, please.
Some of the 2% are adjusted slightly to fit into 26 pays. As elected officials, our pay rates don't carry over, and when we get our W-2, it has to read that we received exactly the amount in the ordinance. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's hard to divide, but if you do the 2%, it might be 1.98, it might be 2.02. Just so if anybody checks it, it's not a math mistake. It's the ability to make all 26 pays equal.
I see.
And as I understand, we currently have the rates defined for 2019, and
correct.
and even though that date is listed in this ordinance, what's happening is we are establishing the pay rates for the next term out. So we are prohibited by Ohio revised law from giving salary increases when we currently serve in office. So all of us will be up for re-election, and this will be for the next term commencing, for which no one has been decided yet. It will be decided at the general election in the fall of 2019. Yes, Councilmember McGee.
I would just like to add that one of us will not be up for re-election at that time, and that certain person who is myself certainly feels that City Council does a hard work and certainly is entitled to a 2% increase, believe me. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Okay. All right.
I'd just like to make a comment. I'm sorry
yes,
to hear your decision.
Yeah. We now have announcements and other business, and one announcement most immediately is that because of the holiday work schedule, we're going to have a very shortened work week, and next week is a committee meeting night. If we have any committees that need to meet, we need the agenda by tomorrow noon. So that's a very short turnaround, but we just need to have that in deference to people's workloads. Mainly our clerk of council, who works very hard. So if we could let them know that, let the clerk know that. Then our other item is to accept the auditor's report for October 2018 financial reports.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion and second to accept these auditor's reports. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay. Do we have, so that the auditor's report is approved. And do we have any other announcements? Okay. All right. We now have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and services that have not been covered on the agenda tonight. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to make any comments? You have up to 3 minutes. Just needs to be on something that we've not already talked about. Okay. Seeing that, I would entertain a motion for us to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned, and the time is 8:39 p.m. Thank you so much.